Hi, I'm Jamie. This is Dead Dodge Garage, and this is a broken Turbo Slant 6. It's not broken, it just won't run. I've already given you my general thoughts on the MSD Atomic system here, and so have like all of the commenters on the previous video. I'll spare you most of that. The fact of the matter is, this system was free and that's why I used it. I'd like to try and do more with it before I just throw it away, but currently I have no handheld controller, and that's a bit of a problem. I was not planning to work on this car today at all. I just wanted to move it. Last time I went to fire it up, it did that no problem. Today, not so much. Of course, I've had ongoing starting issues, and I've cataloged those on video. But this is something else. Today, I hit the key, and it just cranked and cranked and cranked. The fuel pump primed, but then it never came on when the engine was turning, which tells me there is no signal from this distributor to the Atomic unit. Of course, the Atomic triggers the MSD 6A box, so with no signal from that, there's no spark either. I thought it could have been a voltage drop issue. Of course, I did put the battery in the trunk on this to make way for turbo stuff, and that can be a bit of a problem getting juice up to your starter. With enough draw, it could make it so this system just kind of shuts off when the engine's turning, and you might not get a spark trigger. What I did to verify that is, with the key on, I pulled the cap, I lined up two reluctor wheels slightly in the distributor, and then I just turned the thing back and forth using the pod there. Every time one of the teeth passes the pickup there, it should trigger a spark, and I should hear the fuel pump run. But it wasn't doing that. I grabbed a random spare electronic distributor. This happens to be a dual pickup unit for some reason. I gave this a spin with it plugged into that wire down there, and what do you know? Sparks and a fuel pump. That sure sounds like a bad distributor pickup to me, but I needed to confirm that. I loosened the hold down screw and twisted that pickup all the way against the reluctor wheel. With that done, it kind of works. Here I'm repeating the test with the distributor loose. I'm just swiping it past that tooth right there. And, well, sometimes, occasionally, or there you go. Anyway, the point is, if I screw around with this and I totally close that gap to the point that they're like touching, it does something. That is a classic indication of a bad pickup. So the million-dollar question, of course, has that been part of my problem the whole time? The answer? Maybe. Don't know. One way or another, I need to get it out of there and swap that pickup out. Now, this is a problem in a factory-built distributor because the pickups are riveted in place on one side. You can loosen a screw to adjust them, but you can't just pull them out. It's very, very irritating. So I'll be pulling the distributor out. And while I'm at it, since it'll be out, I have one of those fancy Slant 6 distributor hold-down conversion kits. That came from Mattman's Mopars, as well as many other parts I've used in this project, so I might as well install that to aid in my future timing adventures. Hopefully all of that will go well and I'll be able to move this car. In the future, like maybe the near future, I've got a whole bunch of other things to do as well. Look at this. Shiny NOS taillight lenses from eBay. That's cool. And also, replacement reverse lights. I got those from Vanessa with 5-point parts. I'm really excited to class up the totally wrecked rear end of this car with that stuff. We'll make it run first. How about that? Heater core is going to need some attention. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. Let's pull this thing out. So you need to pull a Slant 6 distributor. No problem. Grab a ratchet handle, the world's longest 3/8 extension, and a 7/16 socket. You know, I did remove a bunch of extra components from this area, but it hasn't made getting the distributor out any easier. There's still a bunch of plug wires in the way. Nice new ones that I'm probably going to get all greasy, unfortunately. Come on. Now, I did the build on this distributor in a previous episode. Essentially, all I did was welded the advance mechanism solid. We do still have a vacuum advance pod, which works as an option if we want to boost reference this. You can use the boost to retard the timing, and you can set it up so the vacuum advance is in effect the rest of the time, which can work really well. It's welded up. It's just a basic factory distributor. I had no reason to suspect this nice looking pickup was bad, but it is. The rivet I'm talking about that makes it so you can't just pop this out is there under the reluctor wheel. So I actually have to pop that out too. Unlike the V8 reluctor wheels, which can be phased for either clockwise or counterclockwise direction, these only have one pinhole because they only spin clockwise. And now we're here. The reluctor is removed simply by prying it out with a screwdriver or a short pry bar. And then that rivet that secured the pickup in place, well, it gets the drill treatment. I use a pretty big bit for this because I just want to remove that mushroomed end. You need the rest of it to remain in there to locate your new pickup. Now in this distributor, that rivet is staying tight. If it wasn't, you might need to stake it in place somehow. You could try and mushroom the end out again with a punch or something like that. I have seen plates in remanufactured distributors that have a pin there instead of a rivet. If you already have that, oh, it's so much easier. New used pickup is installed. Pulled that out of a V8 unit. I've got it adjusted at what looks like the right gap. You can check these with a feeler gauge, but I usually don't. Turns out Slant 6 and V8 wires are a different length. So I completely fixed that with some electrical tape and a prayer. Hopefully it doesn't rub. Now I'm turning my attention to the bottom end of this distributor. I've got the two seals off. There's a fat O-ring that sits here. Yeah, okay. And then there's a small O-ring that sits in this groove. And as you can see, both of those are not rubber anymore. This is the early style Slant 6 distributor hold down plate. There's a slot on the distributor itself, and then a slot here where it's bolted to the block. This means that based on where you set this, you only have that amount of adjustment. What I did this time is leave this slightly loose so I could tweak it a little bit more in case I needed to. Now it's completely loose and the whole distributor was just flopping around as I took it out. It's not a great system, I'll just tell you that right now. I can't tell you how many Slant 6s I've gone to time, and because of slightly worn out timing chains, you just cannot get them where they want to be with this plate. So, we're going to throw this away, if it'll actually come off. I've mentioned Mattman's Mopars over the course of this build several times, because he sent me all kinds of fancy Slant 6 doodads. Here's one such doodad, the upgraded hold down kit. Essentially, it turns it into a small block setup. It's a very nice kit. Comes with a main clamp, the piece that goes onto the distributor to give it somewhere to hold, a bolt that goes into the distributor, a bolt that goes into the block, and replacement O-rings, so I don't even have to go digging through my O-ring kit. Alright, it's a little thing. The smaller bolt to secure the plate to the distributor body was too long for mine and it bottomed out in there, so I reused the original. Actually, I had to loosen that bolt and drive the plate home. It's a very tight fit on the machine surface in there. And there it is with the new seals installed. Note, one of those is redundant. It's kind of like a hat on a hat type situation. Why is there an O-ring over an O-ring? No idea. This replacement is a lot smaller than what was in there too, but I think every Slant distributor I've ever pulled out had both, so anyway, it gets both. There's the distributor back in its home. Hopefully it works now. Also, good news. I left the key on for like 4 hours, so I imagine the battery's dead now. Not dead. Still not running. I'm gonna set it on fire. Fresh battery. All right then. You know, I really thought, for a minute there, I really thought that was gonna fix the stalling problem. Nope, no better. So much hate. Also, it might be running out of gas. I arbitrarily lowered the fuel pressure and played with the screw settings and got it slightly better, but we are down on power now. It accelerates less bad, but then I think it's probably going lean under boost. Probably shouldn't do much more of this before I have a working screeny thingy and AFR readouts. That would be smart. And more on that later. Well, the temperature gauge died. Anyway, I think I'm just gonna leave the keys in it. Hopefully it's gone in the morning. That's not enough volts. It's getting old. Okay. Dude, this just isn't fun anymore. You know what it was? Last time I had it running, I made a random shot in the dark at lowering the fuel pressure. I lowered it so far there wasn't enough to start. That's only 5 cylinders. That's not good. What happened? Okay, well, at least it's running. Maybe it'll move. Just remembered all the transmission fluid's probably gone again. Weird that the transmission is working. It's pulling to the left really bad, and it's still on 5 cylinders. I don't know what the deal is with that. What a terrible parking job. In my defense, I was totally blind. Okay, number 6 is currently a dead player. Good chance the plug is just totally covered in gas. That would make some sense. Okay, it's not wet at all, actually. That's interesting. Also, yeah, it's super black and rich and horrible. I could have told you that without ever looking. I want to pull the valve cover to check push rods. It's like seized in place now. There's no silicone in there. Before, it was just coming right off. I've done this multiple times. Oh, I know what it is. It's because I painted the head. The cork stuck to the paint. Dang it. Anyway, I guess I'll keep punching it. No, push rods are perfectly fine. Rockers are still lashed right. Everything's good there. So it must just be some weird ignition problem. I did pull the cap and look for moisture. Maybe that plug is just dead now from being soaked multiple times. All you people hating on my T-handles, the fact that I could just pop that off and then right back on, that's why those are there. I gotta fix some things. I've had about enough of this MSD Atomic EFI system. This thing is terrible. It was terrible when the controller still worked. It's absolutely terrible now. I can't tune it. They don't make them like this anymore. I can't get a new controller. They just straight up don't exist. I'll remind you in case you don't remember. The reason I used this MSD Atomic system is because it was free. So many people have said, ditch that thing and get a blow-through carburetor. And I understand the thinking. But my thinking is, this is a weird little engine with a stupidly big turbo. Having a computer in the middle, reading sensors and kind of dumbing things down for me, might help with the tuning of this animal just a little bit. My vision for the turbo slant has always been electronic fuel injection. And I don't feel that way about almost any other car. I want you to understand that. If this was a normal V8 or even like a normal Slant 6 without the addition of boost, it would have a carburetor. No question. Carburetor, 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 carburetor. You see what I'm saying? That's what I like. But for this, I want EFI. In fact, what I really want is a true multi-point fuel injection system on this thing. Probably something Megasquirt based. Someday, I will build a multi-point EFI manifold, and that's what I'll go to on this thing. Today is not that day. If I wanted to buy another MSD Atomic system, the Atomic 2 that is, because again, they don't sell this one anymore, $1,600. No, thank you. I'm good on that, I think. And there are all kinds of other options. In fact, I've had multiple suggestions too. Fast EFI, for example. Holly Sniper, or the Sniper 2, you know, the newer one they make that's actually supposed to work. When I was having issues with this system and the controller was still working, one of the calls I made was to my friend Dr. Art with Dr. Art's Hot Rod Rehab. He's got a YouTube channel where he does things like program ECMs. In fact, there's one in this box that he did for me some time ago that I still need to install. And we had a chat about the Atomic system. Eventually, we kind of reached the conclusion that it's probably just not well suited for this application. And he recommended a company another commenter or two also mentioned, which I hadn't heard of before. That company is Aces EFI. They're a relative newcomer to the EFI drop-on, bolt-on, fancy retrofit game. But they seem to have some promise. It seems like they know what they're doing. And today, we're going to find out if they do. Now, I also have to give a big thanks to Dr. Art for setting me up with this kit. He's actually a dealer for Aces. If you're interested in these systems, you might give him a holler. He might be able to get you a deal. This is called the Kill Shot Classic. You're going to notice right away, it's pretty similar to the Atomic we already have, but it's bigger and it's also black. The similarities between these systems are absolutely undeniable. You'll notice the linkages look the same, for example. The general configuration of the fuel lines is the same, although they can be flipped to the other side on the kill shot. The underlying technology is essentially exactly the same. These are both 4-barrel carburetor replacement throttle body injection systems. Both of these systems utilize General Motors sensors. There's a GM TPS right there, for example, and they both use the same General Motors temperature probe as well. Although Aces called this an ECM, Atomic EFI calls this a power module, it's still a similar system. There's a module in the throttle body, there's a module over here, it's wired in a similar fashion, it even almost mounts the same, although unfortunately I'm going to have to drill at least 2 new holes. The wiring harness looks very similar, although this one comes with relays. That's interesting. One big difference between the two, the Aces system comes with a fancy touchscreen programmer that's kind of huge. They also have an even huger one available, although frankly, I don't care about that. They even included a nifty windshield mount. Now here are some differences. The Atomic system utilizes boosters, much like a carburetor. In fact, the Atomic system in general was essentially designed as a direct carburetor replacement, to the point that in the programmer, which no longer works, you adjust accelerator pump, and power valve enrichment. I assume the idea was so any carb guy could throw this on their hot rod and it would make sense to them. The Aces killshot system is totally different. Instead of having boosters, the injectors here push fuel into these little holes around the diameter of the throttle bore, and the throttle bore is totally open. This is, in fact, the Killshot Classic. It's very similar to their standard killshot system, except two important differences. One, the injectors in this are smaller. They are notably smaller than the ones in the Atomic system, which I have thought this entire time were probably too big. Two, the Classic's cheaper. There's actually a third difference. The Killshot Classic does not have timing control built in. Honestly, I'm kind of fine with that because I've had nothing but problems with the timing control in the Atomic system. That's honestly down to the fact that I never phased the rotor, but now I don't have to worry about that at all. I'm going to stick with mechanical control. Currently it is locked out, but I do have a vacuum advance to play with, which could be good. I've done some reading on turbo slants, of course, and one of the things I've read is that it's pretty ideal to stick the timing right around 24 total and just lock it out. With my locked out distributor, I am ready to do that. Notice I said it was cheaper. I paid like $600 for this thing. Or to put that another way, $1,000 less than the Atomic 2 kit. Yes, $600 is still a pretty substantial investment. And yes, I could have gone out and bought a brand new carburetor for cheaper. I think in the long run, it's going to work better. And I already have an EFI tank and a regulator and the plumbing. To me, for $600 to get rid of that pile and have half a chance of tuning this thing correctly, that's money well spent. I did really like the look of the Atomic. I'm not so sure about all this satin black stuff. I cut like 30 zip ties and I bruised my hand on one of the T-handles. After all those nice things I said about them. Yeah, this whole dealy bob here needs a rethink. It just falls apart for fun. I should probably get a generic throttle cable and the piece of bracketry that matches and just attaches to this. That's a future Jamie problem. Well, I'll say this for the Atomic. It came right off. It would probably make a pretty cool sound hitting the bottom of the trash can too, but well, I gotta pull the fittings and such off first, so we'll hang on to it for now. There's just nothing like covering yourself in gasoline right before dinner. You know Mrs. Jamie loves that. Yeah, the pooled gasoline in the intake, that was a recurring theme with this system. I'm really hoping the Killshot does better here. Ta-da! Okay, it's not quite that easy, but it's close. Connect the lines, swap the power module, run several wires. That's not even it for the surprises. I got a real carb hat. And my thanks to gold member Ben Braddock for that. Do need a different boot thing, and I'm gonna have to reconfigure the tube setup. Yeah, I got some work to do. It's the next day and I'm back at it. I decided to switch around the mounting hardware since when I mounted the Atomic system, all I could come up with were these tiny 1/4-inch fasteners. Of course, the way we made this intake is by welding a carb spacer onto an aluminum manifold with another spacer in between. And for some reason, I did not put nuts underneath there, so I was using nuts and bolts like this. Well, couldn't get those in on the other side of the Aces system, so now I'm using some long carb studs. I put nylocks on the bottom threads and the regular nuts up here on the top. Those are 5/16, so they're a lot beefier and hopefully they'll work. I have every intention, as I mentioned, of getting rid of this goofy setup I concocted. It's really goofy. I'm not doing that right now, so I put this on here, and actually on the Aces throttle body, it holds itself the way it's supposed to. On the Atomic system, this barely worked, so that is kind of cool. I was only able to put one screw in an old hole because the pattern is wider in every dimension, and that is annoying. They actually included isolating rubber feet for it, so I guess I need to mount those and re-drill the holes anyway. At what point was I supposed to read the instructions for this thing? There actually aren't instructions, so I guess I'm in the clear. Okay, there are instructions. I just have to go find them. All right, first impression, good one. The wiring harness for the Killshot perfectly laid out with my setup. Perfectly. The oxygen sensor connector is there. The temp sensor wire was just long enough to wrap around the valve cover and come here so it's no longer on top, which I did kind of hate. The rest of the harness goes back here, it goes through that factory holder, dips down, and then comes up right here. I ended up putting the relays and the fuses in the position where the previous power box was. The only part I don't like is that their box ends up kind of here. I'm gonna have to mount it on those stands and drill some new holes. It's not the tidiest looking thing, but it'll work. I do like that, unlike the Atomic, this system does have a real main relay and a real fuel pump relay. Here's the wire coming out of that relay to power the pump. It happens to be orange, just like the Atomic. I cut the original one right there, so I'll just join them together. This is the main ground for the Aces system. This is the main battery power feed, and then this is the key feed. I'll tie that into the original bypassed ballast resistor harness, just like I did for the other system. I want to point this out. This thing supports CAN bus, which a lot of these systems don't. In theory, you could hook up all kinds of accessories over the CAN bus. The reason they include it is for the little screen monitor controller programmer thingy. But they also supply this. It's a CAN to USB adapter. It actually might be helpful for me in the future if I need to get Dr. Art to write me a tune and load it into this thing. It's only now I find out they have other finishes. I didn't really want shiny polished either, or anodized fake holly gold, so I guess it's still the black. All right, one little issue, and I did read about this in the instructions. Always read the instructions, it's a smart thing to do. Anyway, I had some concerns that mounting this near the 6A might not be the greatest of ideas, and that's what the instructions confirm. Because this CD box is a somewhat noisy, electrically speaking, device, it can disturb the important highly sensitive circuits in this thing. So you don't really want this or its wiring next to the 6A. Unfortunately, I might be stuck with that. Maybe I move the 6A box. I don't know, I gotta think about this. The other thing I thought was neat was the included fuel pressure sensor cable, which happens to line up perfectly with the port on my fancy regulator. You are required to have a regulator like this that's compatible with EFI, and they say it even has to be vacuum referenced. Of course, I've already got mine set up that way. The issue is they don't include a fuel pressure sensor. If you want one from Aces, you have to give them an extra $120, which seems excessive. It would be very nice to know what the pressure in this system is. I need to ensure it's somewhere in the 43 to 58 PSI range. The Atomic had that built in. That was like the one nice thing. One thing that was not explained in the instructions is why they included this extra relay. It may be intended to power the module itself. As it turns out, the main relay is not for that. It powers the oxygen sensor heaters and I think the injector driver, something like that. And then the second one is for the fuel pump. One thing that was explained in the instructions, the fact that these main power and grounds are supposed to go directly to the battery. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen because the battery is in the trunk. I do have to change the wideband sensor only because the plug is slightly different. This one appears to be the same that is used with the Sniper. I could be wrong though. The other one looks like this. When you know the rules, you are allowed to bend them. And with that in mind, I'm going to run the main 12-volt feed to this same stud on the starter relay where I'm currently running the MSD feed. That's not ideal either. It really should go to battery positives. To get it there, I would have to extend it all the way to the trunk. And now I would have to do that for 2 wires. This stud is fed by this nice chunky wire coming off of the starter main terminal, which is fed by battery positive. So, you know, it's close. I think it's okay. The ground, I'm going to run with the MSD ground, which I put there on the bell housing. I have a big gnarly cable going from the frame to the block here, so hopefully that's good enough. This is the simple jumper wire I made up to delete the ballast resistor when I did this install, and as you can see, there's a small wire coming out of one of those. That is what triggered the Atomic system. I'm just going to remake that for the Aces. All right, I think it's going to go like this. Hopefully that's enough inches away from the MSD 6A for the Aces system to be happy. I'll find little spots to screw down the fuse holders and the relays, and I don't know, it may not be the tidiest thing in the universe, but it will work. This is something. It's something temporary. I don't love this. There's still no beads on this little chunk of pipe between these 2 random boots. I'd like to find one adapter boot that steps down from the 4 to the 2.5 and get rid of that. Ideally, it'll be long and flexible like that one so I can get around this breather cap. It's been a bit since the last Turbo Slant update, and I can't remember if I've addressed these comments or not, but I did hear from people about having my air filter behind the radiator. I'll be building a shield, and it'll duct air in from right here. Given the amount of time I have for this project right now, or lack thereof, I don't think any of the wiring stuff is going to get finished nicely. I think I'm just going to get this up and running, do like a proof of concept, and I'll get back to that later. This is the points trigger wire. Comes off of the tack signal from the 6A and triggers the kill shot. Over here are the 2 fan control wires, and then there is a tack out signal as well. I'll run that into the tack I've got planned for the dash, and the 2 fan wires will get extended over to there where I'm going to put the fan relays. Did I already say I put a fresh plug in number 6? Well, I put a fresh plug in number 6. I would have gotten 6 of them, but crap only had 4, so I got 1. Yeah, math. Power wires are terminated. Unless I'm forgetting something, it's time to hook the battery back up and turn the key on. Ooh. Okay. many more hands. Had to take the screen protector off. Oh, there are lights. They probably mean something. Anyway, Kill Shot Classic. This is in the setup wizard thing, of course. No, that one goes down to 61 CID. We're gonna be close to that. 170. That'll confuse it. Well, that was easy. And I'll tell you, this touchscreen is not amazing, but compared to like the Sniper, incredible. Interestingly enough, all of the timing control stuff is still in here, even though the Kill Shot Classic is not supposed to have that function. There's no wire for timing output. I have a theory it's that blue wire that's cut off in the harness right there. I'm sure they use the same harness for both systems, and that makes good sense, but I don't know, that still seems a little cheap. I was gonna say that the prime hold for this seemed pretty long. It's set to 5.5 seconds, and that is actually customizable, which is pretty neat. I set the rev limiter at 5,800. That's where it should cut fuel. Of course, again, this thing doesn't have spark control. The 6A does not have a built-in rev limiter either. I'm gonna hit the key. Wish me luck. It's definitely getting an RPM signal. Oh, there it goes. Doesn't sound like 6 cylinders either. Okay, there we go. That's something. It idled up and stalled exactly like the Atomic system. There is some heat in the number 6 runner, and when it fired up, it sounded like 6 cylinders, so that's the good news. Flashy blue lights. Ah, that must be the relay control. That's nifty. Hey, where did I leave the timing on this thing? Just like the Atomic system, the AFR is reading super lean, but it smells super rich. And the map sensor is showing, well, 5 PSI, that shouldn't be in PSI. I just don't understand this at all. Like, not at all. I've screwed with it extensively. I've balanced fuel pressure with no fuel pressure gauge, of course, and idle speed on the screws between the primary and the secondary sides. And I've gotten it to the point where the idle valve is just barely cracked at idle, and it kind of sounds okay. It's still hesitant to rev, though. As soon as it revs up, it coughs. Starting to wonder if I've got like a fuel supply issue. Now remember, it's a brand new fuel tank, brand new intake pump, brand new inline filter. Also, I haven't wired the cooling fans yet, and might be getting a little warm. And all of that, I believe, is from heater core leakage in the heater box, which I have pinched the lines to off. I don't know why it's still doing that. I need to get the relays mounted for the fans and just get that done. Might have time. Solved that one. I had to borrow this pair of vice grips to do the throttle stuff, and I didn't get it on there tight enough. That was not even 5 minutes. The I meant front floor. That's gonna take a while. I got the electric fans grounded on these convenient posts on both sides, and whoops, they do work. Now I need to get relays mounted, get them wired to said relays, and get the computer controlling those. Obviously, I need to replace the heater core because it leaks terribly. What I should do for now is loop the heater hoses so nothing goes in there. What I'm gonna do instead is install a depressurized cap after topping up the coolant-ish. It'll piddle some out of that overflow hose, and then it'll find its happy equilibrium and it should stay there. That is temporary. Having your cooling system pressurized raises the boiling point, and in general, it's a good thing to do. But this will be fine for now. It's much better than spewing all over the floor. I bought these relays for the cooling fans quite some time ago. I finally got them mounted on the inner fender. These were pre-existing holes for something. I just kind of enlarged them with these random screws. My very first Dead Dodge Garage video ever was explaining how relays work, so I don't think I necessarily need to rehash all of that. Essentially though, power comes in here, power goes out to the accessory here, and then you need a trigger power and trigger ground. You can either have them permanently grounded and trigger with the power side, or vice versa. Run key power to this, and then your trigger can be on the ground side. And that's how these electronic fuel injection systems are set up to control the relays. Ground side triggering, which is pretty typical of factory ECMs too. I don't understand why this is leaking. This is a hose that was supplied with the turbo and a fitting that was supplied with the turbo, and for some reason they just don't seal to each other at all. Ah. Okay. Still running. Oh my god. Okay, I just don't understand at all. Is this thing like out of gas? Well, I've been messing with it for quite some time now, and this is as good as it gets. Also, I gave up on getting the fans wired tonight, so I'm currently powering up the fan the fun way. It's kind of idling now, but it still has a horrible hesitation when you hit the throttle, which I do not understand. It's demented. I think I'm gonna shoot it. The only good news is there is no good news. I don't understand. Well, it kind of did a burnout. Can you just run? Just go in the shop. Please go in the shop. Come on, dude. I know what to do. And it's not smash this EFI system with a hammer, although I'd kind of like to. For now, I either need this thing in the shop or out of the shop. And frankly, I don't care if it ends up in the slough. I think I hate it. Yeah, I hate it. It's the build that never ends. Well, that's something. Who wants to see me drop my phone in the floodwater? It's the next day, and I think I know what's going on. Maybe. Hang on, I gotta rig something up for a test. Hey, remind me to get the shop plumb for air. This is just ridiculous. Anyway, here's the test rig I made up to check for vacuum leaks 4 months ago when I first put this thing together. I suspect there may well be some more. If you're familiar with these 80s aluminum Slant 6 one-barrel manifolds, which is what this contraption is welded on top of, then you know they're not exactly the greatest. They're poorly built, and they tend to have various leaks around all of the welds holding them together. So I'm fully expecting, based on what multiple commenters have told me, to pressurize this thing and then spray some fluid on here with soap in it and get bubbles all over the place. So far, not so much, even on the really ugly sections up here. But I did find the source of the mysterious fuel leakage, and it's right here in the weld to the lower spacer. Michael! So there's one more vacuum leak plugged with some silicone. Thing is that silicone's not going to hold up under boost, and of course gasoline's going to slowly eat it away anyway, so that's not a good strategy for survivability here. And I know that. I've known that the whole time. This manifold is not long for this world, unfortunately. Various commenters have been perplexed by this setup from the get-go. Why is the throttle body twisted? Why didn't you get a real manifold? Well, I had an idea. I had a vision, and I had these pieces sitting around. I thought it would be really cool to just put them together and fabricate an intake from this setup from scratch at home. I'm impressed with it, at least visually speaking. Unfortunately, functionality-wise, it sucks. And I believe that is the crux of the problem here. This manifold is riddled with vacuum leaks, I'm sure. And even if it wasn't, the design sucks. There's no getting around that. From the get-go, I wanted to do this build as cheaply as possible. If I was going to upgrade components, I wanted to prove the theory first. Does it work? Does it make boost? Does it hold together for more than 5 minutes? So far, the answer to most of those questions has been, yeah. Thing is, I don't think the manifold design explains how absolutely terrible this is all the time. It makes no sense. Why? I'm sure it's obvious at this point that the atomic system itself was not my problem. But the thing is, I couldn't tune it. I couldn't do anything with it with that stupid screen dead, and it's irreplaceable, so I had to do something else one way or another. And now I have this. I think it's probably time to get into the tune on this Aces system, which is a whole lot more adjustable, and maybe I can find some things in there that'll improve the situation here. Maybe less startup fuel, maybe more startup idle air valve. Maybe screw with the settings a little bit and see what I can come up with. There are definitely more changes coming for this setup, but I have got to be able to get it back to where it was. You know, vaguely drivable up and down the road. How many cylinders is that? Like 3? Yeah, it is, actually. 2, 3, and 6 are the only holes firing right now. Presumably because those plugs got wet. What makes no sense at all here is when it's firing up, it seems to be lean. In fact, a little bit of the magic spray and it actually revved up and did stuff. This is such a weird dance. I thought it was super mega rich, so I pulled fuel out of the enrichment, the startup circuits, and then it like wouldn't fire at all. So I put a bunch more back in, and then it kind of sort of almost fired, and then I added spray and it kicked right off. So I guess it was actually lean, despite the fact that it was like billowing rich smoke and fouling plugs. I have no explanation for this. I'm sure this is obvious, but no amount of tuning is going to help if it's only running on 3 holes. So I'm going to go get another set of spark plugs. In fact, I'm going to try a different flavor this time. It's hours later, and I've switched to the good stuff. The plug on the right is a ZFR5N, also NGK, much like the one on the left. Notice, though, it's an extended reach plug. It's got the ceramic and strap sticking way out into space there. Now, people on the Slant 6 forums swear by these plugs. Not necessarily for boosted use, but apparently they're better for some reason. So I'm going to give these a shot. Personally, I think they're weird looking. And in some applications, if you just shove a longer plug in your chambers all willy-nilly, it could run into pistons, but apparently that's not an issue on the Slant. As with the other plugs, I do have to remove the washers. Because this engine uses spark plug tubes, you can't have the washers on there. The tube acts as the washer. If you leave these in place, they'll chew up the tubes and that'll make a horrible mess. I will also be gapping these to about 25 thou just like the other ones because boost. Yeah, a little soggy. That explains that. A pressure gauge is a pressure gauge, right? I sure hope so, because currently my nice vintage Stewart Warner oil pressure gauge is plumbed to the fuel system of the Valiant here. I'm planning to install these in the garbage can Cuda at some point in the future. Anyway, before I inevitably foul out another set of spark plugs, I do want to at least glance at the fuel pressure on this thing and see if that has anything to do with my issues. I've been adjusting the regulator in and out, and I haven't yet found a place that's really happy, so this should be very helpful. I did order a gauge to install on the regulator. It won't be here for a couple days, and I really need to get this figured out now-ish. Oh. Okay, well, it's 60, and that's too much. 55. Okay, that's 50, and if the vacuum regulator works the way it's supposed to, it should cut it down a good ways once it's running. That is, if it runs, of course. Okay, well, it's certainly not a fuel supply problem. Still terrible. When the vacuum came in, it did drop down to 40-ish. That was after I lowered the fuel pressure even more. And when it first started, it was still horribly rich, judging by the smoke and the smell. Okay, I think I broke it. Here's the deal. I think I broke this. It's not communicating with the screen anymore, And sometimes it'll prime the pump, sometimes it won't. Sometimes it'll still start, sometimes it won't. I think I ruined it with voltage. As mentioned, I did not wire it correctly because the stupid battery's in the stupid trunk. But I thought that would be a perfectly acceptable solution. Maybe it's not. Maybe this is my fault. I don't know. As you can see, I added a jumper wire to try and run the MSD and this straight off of battery positive, and it almost improved things, almost. And that's when the bad stuff happened and this stopped working. So I don't know. There's a good chance this is all my fault. To this point, I have had nothing but problems with this. It didn't run as well as the crappy ancient atomic system that I took off. Starting was equally bad, and in general, I'm not excited at this point. However, I am not yet ready to pass judgment on the Aces system, or Aces as a company. I'm going to give them a call on Monday. Of course, it's Saturday at like 6:30 p.m. now, and I shouldn't even be out here. And I'm going to talk to them about what this thing's doing, and we'll see what they say. I'm also going to have to mention that it was leaking liquid gas around the secondary throttle shaft and ask them for their thoughts on that situation. I have a feeling that about 139 of you are going to comment and tell me to put a blow-through carburetor on here again. You know, I'm thinking about it. My understanding has always been that EFI and turbos go together. If this stupid system actually would have fired up and run, then I could have messed with fuel tables. It would be endlessly tunable. It could work very well. It just doesn't. When I was sure that the fuel system was workable, I was planning to install this. It's an actual fancy Clifford manifold that, with the proper top plate, will mount a 4-barrel correctly. And that would be very nice. The manifold swap would rule out any possibilities that a porous aluminum factory manifold is screwing with our tune here. Although again, I pressure tested it. There are at least no major leaks left. At least 15 of you are going to comment and tell me that the turbo slant idea is stupid simply because of these problems I'm having with the fuel system. And that is not true. There's a lot of potential here. I've already seen it at work at like 7 pounds of boost, and it was pretty great. I was really looking forward to cranking that up to like 10 if everything went well with this, but it hasn't. So that's where we're at. Nothing has gone to plan. I spent more money for what could be no reason. I'm extremely frustrated. All I can smell is super rich exhaust smoke, and I'm done. I'm gonna go eat some pizza and enjoy a frosty cold adult beverage, and forget about all of this for at least a couple days. And then maybe I'll go back to my new happy place, which is over here. Oh yeah, so simple. Such a piece of garbage. So there you go, Turbo Slant Valiant, broken, stuck in my way, and smells. Hopefully you enjoyed that. I didn't at all. Until next time, as ever, thanks for watching. And remember,
this is the battle that never ends. Yeah, it goes on and on, my friends. One day I started building it, not knowing what it was. And now I guess I'm just stuck in here building it because it is the build that never ends.